Hi everyone, in this video I want to look at just some very simple tips to how we can stay safe online, both from a personal life perspective but also at work. As always, if this is useful, please go ahead and like and subscribe. We see so many stories today about so-and-so attacked and company attacked, and very often there are some fairly simple things we can keep in mind that can help protect us. Basically, we have to assume the internet is bad. Everywhere on the internet is evil Kermit really looking to do something mean, to take our credentials, to get our information and do something. So fundamentally, the first rule is don't trust the internet. If ever there's even a hint of doubt from some communication, from some interaction, validate it through another means. If it's an email, call them. If it's a strange text message, validate it with the company using their direct website, not via a link, not by something else. Trust your gut. Often our gut will pick up on signals that maybe our conscious isn't, and it's warning us. This has evolved over thousands of years. I taught Krav Maga for 10 years. There's always be stories of people saying, hey, this felt wrong, but I didn't want to be silly, so I didn't cross the road, or I didn't call someone, and then something negative happens. So trust your gut. It's there to help you. It's evolved. So if something doesn't feel right, never worry about feeling silly. Go and validate it through some other means. So what are some of the key things we can do? So if we start off with our equipment. So when we think about equipment, this could be our desktop computer. It could be a laptop. It could be a tablet device. It could be our phone. And there's various aspects we think about with this. Firstly, the operating system. Keep it patched. Keep it current. Keep it patched. Have that auto update. Most attacks, if we think about bad things happening against our machines, are vulnerabilities that have already been fixed. It's just they've not rolled out the latest patches. So think about making sure you have update on your Windows, on your Linux, on your iOS, on your Android, whatever that might be. Make sure you get into good habit. Don't push off patches. Oh, I'll do it later. I'll do it later. Make sure you've got those auto updates turned on and make sure you do it in a timely fashion. So that's a really important thing. And the same goes for our applications. If we think we have applications running, we'll keep those current as well. We want latest versions because they have protections, might be certain behavior in those. If I'm someone at a company responsible for servers, those same instructions would apply. Hey, make sure we're kept up to date, we're patching, we're protecting those things. Make sure you have antivirus. So if I think about, I want antivirus. And once again, make sure that is kept current. There are definition files that help you identify bad behavior, bad signals. Well, if it's out of date, that's not helping very much. And the default on most operating systems will be to automatically update these and get the latest definition files. So we just want to make sure we have that as well. Again, operating systems, they have this built in Windows. It has Defender just there. It's going to automatically update. Don't turn those things off. The same applies to things like firewall. Most operating systems have a firewall. Leave that enabled. Don't just turn it off because it seems like, oh, it's getting in the way of some application. If there's something you need to go through the firewall, then you can create exceptions. But create that exception as granular as you can. Don't just, oh, I'll open this thing up. Hey, maybe I need to open up to a specific port, to a specific application or from a specific IP address. Be as granular as you can. In the corporate world, we always think least privilege. Make it as specific as possible. You don't want to give things extra permissions, anything beyond what's absolutely required. If we think about from a storage perspective, for example, the disk. This is especially important on anything mobile, but even on our desktop machines, we want encryption. So this could be something like BitLocker. If we're talking about a Windows device, this might be something like dmcrypt. if we're talking about Linux devices, get that in-place encryption. Even if there's no USB key I have to insert or a PIN to type in, it still gives me great protection because I can't take the disk out of the machine and do anything with it. And even if I take the whole machine, well, there's a piece of hardware called a TPM inside that machine that has the key to open up that disk and be able to use that information. Well, that means to do anything useful, it has to boot into the operating system. Well, then I need a valid credential. So it protects the information on that machine. So even if I don't have to do in a PIN to start it up, it's still giving me that great protection. If I'm at home, there's probably other devices I have. I have, for example, things like gateway devices. Maybe I have my own custom Wi-Fi. Make sure these, for example, have latest firmware, because they may get additional protections. Do not have default passwords. Do not have default names if you can change it. So no default credentials. Change those things straight away. And if they have their own kind of firewall, leave that turned on. Now you may say, well, wait, you had a firewall here in the OS. Why do I need it in the gateway as well, or on my Wi-Fi? Always think layers. If you, in the old days, if you was in a castle, you had great big stone walls and you had a moat and you had archers, you had all these different layers of defense because one can fail. I find a way around one of them. So we think defense in depth, layers of protection to really maximize the protection we have and minimize the ability for someone to get round any one particular layer. So, hey, great, the more layers of protection, the better I have. Now, if we travel, be careful of bad Wi-Fi's, for example. Hey, I may be out and about and I see, oh, a free Wi-Fi. And it says free Wi-Fi. Well, how do you know that's legitimate? Unless there's some printed material, some signs up, maybe the airport, hey, Wi-Fi available, this is the SID you're going to connect to. Be very, very careful with that. Be careful if someone gives you, for example, a USB device. Someone gives you a little USB key. Well, I don't know, there's not something bad on that piece of device. So no, we don't just, hey, someone gives us a USB key, it's free with something, we find it and we plug it into our machine. That might introduce malware, which can then go and do bad things. So it's all about restricting the ability for evil, for that evil bad Kermit, to get onto our machine. So we think, hey, how can I protect my device? Because that's definitely one way. That's an aspect that attackers can use, is attacking our equipment. But there's another way. So if we think about, well, that's the machine, and there are definitely bad things that can happen there, well, the other element, obviously, is us. Us as a human being. Hey, we sit here and we're all happy, and we're using our machines. Well, us as a human being also has digital sets of identities. And they can be compromised. So yes, one, hey, I attack my equipment. The other is I try and get my identity, because if I have my identity, we have to authenticate to maybe my machine, I have to authenticate to other services I use. So they'll try and get our identity. So how can we help protect that? Now our machine, we log on. Use things like Windows Hello for Business if I can. It's a gesture, it's a PIN, it's a biometric that's only useful to that local device. If someone sees my PIN, they can't go and try that on another device, it won't work. So if I can do that, fantastic. For my accounts, what's actually interesting, if possible, use a pass phrase, because that's greater than a password. So a passphrase would be a combination of words. Apple, tree, cart, horse, computer. which is maybe easy for us to remember, but for a computer, that's so many characters, so many bits, that's very hard for it to attack. Whereas what we might think is a complicated password, because I've got a number in there and a dollar sign in there and an exclamation mark, but if it's only 8 characters long, it's actually pretty easy for a computer to attack. So there's this whole idea of passphrases that are better than passwords. And I might have multiple identities. I might have my identity, my personal, I might have my one at my work, but also I might think about it, well, there's lots of cloud services. So I might actually have, hey, there's all these different cloud services around, and I'm using different companies and different stores online, and every one of those, hey, I have an identity. And every one of those requires a password. So never reuse. Never reuse the password or the passphrase or whatever that is. Always create a unique passphrase. And the reason for that is, if I use the same password everywhere, that's easy maybe for me to remember, but if one of those is compromised, hey, some attacker gets this little website where I went and bought some cookies from, if that's compromised and they get the password, well, now I can use the same password against all these other services, and that's a huge problem. So we want to make sure we use unique credentials. Now that might say, well, how am I going to remember all that? There are password managers, there are solutions out there that help take some of that complexity away from you. So you can look at those types of solutions, but make sure it's a reputable one before I just start giving everything my password. Now, in an ideal world, I don't want separate identities. So in an ideal world, I have an identity and I use something called federation. And federation basically means, hey, I have an identity already and I want to use it for these other sites. You may sometimes see a site that says, hey, do you want to create an account? Or do you want to use your Microsoft account or your Google account or your Facebook account? It doesn't tell those companies your password, but it's going to use that existing identity to identify you on other services. So that means there isn't a unique password I have to remember. There isn't some credential that can get hacked at these sites. I'm just using this now single identity. So use that if it's available to you. It's going to save you having to have those separate accounts. Now, where I do have accounts, well, let's make them as secure as possible. So great, passphrases are good, but what we really want to do is things like MFA. Multi-factor authentication. And you'll see this a lot. They offer this option. Maybe there's an application authenticator app that generates a code or you have to say yes to. So the best option is if there is some sort of app, or maybe it's a physical token even that displays a number. Or maybe it's a phone call. Or maybe it sends an SMS, a text message. And those are kind of the order. An app's the best if I can get that, an app or a token or some sort of voice interaction, or an SMS is still better. Again, there are targeted type of attacks, but it's pretty rare. This is much, much better than just having a password. So multi-factor authentication or passwordless. I don't have a password at all. It's only some authenticator app that I try and go to a site and I'll get prompted, hey, is this you? Are you authenticating? I'll be like, oh, yes, that's me. And what's so powerful about something like passwordless is for the user, if now you are being tricked in some way and something pops up and says, hey, enter your password, you've got out the habit of using, you may not even know what your password is anymore, and it's going to jar you. Everything's about trying to shake the user out of just some muscle memory and doing something. If I can jar the user, then they're going to think twice about it. So if normally they're passwordless and then they go to a site that's trying to trick them and it asks them to enter their password, they're going to be like, well, I don't even know what my password is, and that's a bit weird. The same thing for MFA. I don't want to constantly prompt users for MFA. I want to jar them and be like, wait, why am I being asked to MFA? Am I doing something that's risky? Am I doing something that's a heightened set of permissions? That's when we want to ask for MFA. It's going to shake them out of just always clicking yes. We're like, oh, many solutions, for example, Azure AD, when I get that MFA prompt, I can configure it to say, show them the geographical location where this activity is happening from that wants the MFA. So if I'm based in the US and I see, oh, it's asking me for MFA from Russia or somewhere, I'm like, well, that's a bit odd. It may not even let you just type yes. Type in the number that it's showing you, the challenge you're getting. Again, jarring you, making you wake up and not just click yes, jarring you, getting you to think about exactly what's happening. So that's really a key thing. If your check engine light is always on in your car and it lights up, do you do anything? No. That's why you only want those to get it fixed. So it's actually going to jar you and wake you up if you see some sign of warning. You don't want to get used to it. Maybe an outer case scenario, but if you do have to have these separate accounts, if it makes you set up challenge questions and it's not an important site, I would consider maybe picking things that are not your normal sets of challenge questions, which then could be used to try and validate I am someone against a real identity I care about, maybe even create fake answers. So you can think about those things as well. So these are all kind of attacks and things I can do to protect myself. But these are actually not the most common things, or how do people get the identities? Unfortunately, what's the weakest link? It's probably not my device. It's probably not the services I use. The weakest link very often is me. So many types of attacks will actually be against the human element of this picture. You'll hear the term phishing attacks. It's trying to trick the user through some form of communication. Those forms of communication can come from many, many different means. For example, I was actually funny, last year I was at my accountant's office doing taxes, and my accountant, she's a very nice lady, but was all in a panic when I got there because she was on the phone with the sheriff's office, who there was a warrant. And if she didn't pay this money straight away, they were going to come and arrest her. She's, again, more elderly lady. I was like, I haven't done anything. I don't know what this is, but I don't want to get arrested. It's someone trying to trick her to get money. In this case, it wasn't trying to get an identity. It was trying to get money. The sheriff is not phoning you up saying they're about to arrest you. Microsoft are not calling you up to say they've found a virus. Go and download this remote desktop software so they can fix it. And keep that in mind. Now you might say, oh, they're telling me to download software from a reputable website. It's Microsoft's website, so it must be good. Realize even positive tools can be used for negative things. A remote desktop tool can be used for good. A good person can now connect to your machine and do good. But that same tool that's essentially allowing a remote connection, a bad person using the same tool to get access to your machine can do bad. A good person driving the car can get from A to B. A bad person driving a car can try and do damage. So just because a tool seems to have a valid use doesn't mean a bad person can't do bad things with it. So if I think of, hey, me as a person, well, one of the mechanisms to try and do bad things is they can call me up. And one of the key tenets, that's supposed to be a phone. I would draw a dial on it, but younger people won't understand why there's a dial, so it would obviously be numbers on that phone. They're going to introduce a sense of urgency. And that's a key sign we're going to see over and over again. I'm about to come and arrest you. You have a virus. You've won $1 million. You've won a free pizza. That may get me. They're going to introduce some sense of urgency to make your brain not engage and think, oh, I have to do something right now, so you can't consider it. Take a step back. It's super unlikely, unless you're doing generally weird and bad things. You're never just going to get phoned up and say you've won money or a free pizza, unfortunately. Take a step back. It's a trap. They're doing these things to make you not be able to function and get you to respond. And again, remember, even if it's a positive tool, hey, go and download this, go to Microsoft.com and search for remote help, remote assistance. It can be used for bad things by a bad person. So don't think, oh, it's from a good site. It must be being used for good. Could be a text message. Could be SMS. I see this a lot as well. Oh, this is from your bank. Click this link. Do whatever this thing is. Now realize sometimes it could be a valid communication. Validate. Always validate. And validate through something completely unrelated to that means of communication. If I get a phone call telling me to go and go to this particular thing, no, I will hang up, make a separate phone call to my bank, a separate phone call to the IRS, a separate phone call to the pizza restaurant. If it's an SMS message, don't click any link in it, go directly to my bank or whatever that is to validate. Always validate. If there's even a shred of doubt, validate those things. I got one about Amazon was about to cut off my account. They'd be nuts. I think I financed them. Email. Email is a super, super common one. And this one can be very, very tricky. It's super easy to fake who an email is from. It may say it's coming from my bank, but it's not. But generally, if I'm really determined, I can still completely fake all of the email address. But look for things like mismatched domains. And what that means is it's saying it's from Bank of America, for example, and maybe even the friendly name says something at bankofamerica.com. But if you actually select it or hover over it, it'll show you the actual email address and it's different. If it's saying it's from Bank of America support or something, then you look and it's from a Gmail address or something else, that's a pretty good sign that's probably not valid. So in the last couple of days, I had a couple of things. So let's look at this, for example. So I had this. I was chosen by Mark Zuckerberg, which is fantastic. Strangely enough, he has this very weird email address. But Mark Zuckerberg, he's a co-founder and CEO. He couldn't quite get his Wikipedia link right. Okay, it doesn't big matter. Oh, but then he's got another email address. This time it's a Gmail at markz844. But if I email him, he's secretly going to give me $1.5 million. I mean, it sounds like a no-brainer. That I should definitely do this. Secretly sent to recipients. But kind of look what happened. Even with this one, it's been detected as junk by my email client. It's like, this doesn't look quite right. I mean, these are super common, and it's just a numbers game. Realize that most people are not going to fall for this type of thing. But it's the same people that come to your door at home. Oh, we're trying to sell you solar panels or whatever that might be. And you're like, why do they bother? Because you only need one out of 10, 100,000, a million. And to send these types of emails, there's nothing to this. They've won. They've got someone. So this one is like a super bad example. It's like so obvious. This was a different one I got. Now this one initially, if you looked at it, it just said system administrator. But then if you selected it, then it showed you the email address. This was pretending it was coming from my work. This was to my work address. I'm pretty sure Microsoft is not sending that. That doesn't sound quite right. And it even warned me, hey, look, you don't often get email. And then it has a link. Why is this important to help me? The logo's a little bit off. But hey, what is common about this? A sense of urgency. Or an alert. The alert is triggered. And then it wants me to keep my password. Now, this looks like, oh, I want to keep my password. I should definitely click this. Well, if we actually hover over it, it was a bad link. It was taking me somewhere that would have just harvested my credentials. So that's obviously a bad thing. And if you look at most mail clients now, it's super easy. It's just saying I sent myself, so ignore the email address. But again, well, hey, trusted email address. This is just HTML. I just put this in as a one-cell table. It had my name. It must be valid. realize most of your information is leaked on the dark web. Even if it has your address in it, it's meaningless. Everything is leaked. Your email, your full name, your date of birth, your address, it's all out there. So just because an email seems to have valid stuff doesn't mean anything. But notice again, even mine, hey, look, I put in a sense of urgency. But the key point here is this link looks very valid. I got this from, this is just actually linking to a search result, the image. But if I hover over the link, notice what it actually resolves to is completely different. Ha ha ha, give me your money, .random, .blah. Obviously, I'm just creating a junk link there, but it's just HTML. Just because you have a link doesn't mean that's actually where it goes to. So never trust any of the things that's in an email message. Always kind of hover over, don't click links in email. So one thing is, okay, mismatched domains. We also want to look out for fake links. The other big thing is attachments. PDF document, a HTML document, an exe, that's a huge warning sign, but they generally will try and avoid X's because they're so obvious. Hey, here's an email, here's your invoice for the thing you bought. I didn't buy that. Why is there an invoice? Let's click the invoice. It's a trap. There's a copyright issue. It's a trap. Thank you for your order. It's a trap. Pretty much it's a trap. PDF, HTML, executable. Now, your company email, for example, may go and check these things. It may go and do some validation. You may see sometimes an attachment removed because it's detected it's put in a detonation chamber. It did some tests and it saw it does bad things. It knows bad types of automatic things. But there's so many of these types of scams. Now, there might be very targeted attacks. Remember, you're receiving an email, and who is that email from? That email is from a human. It could be your boss, it could be a coworker, but what if they've been compromised? They've been taken over by evil Kermie. So just because it even comes from someone you trust, if there's like an attachment on it and there's some weird instructions that don't seem quite right, call them. Hey, I got this email from you, or the set of instructions. Just seemed a little bit odd. Just, hey, call me silly. Just wanted to validate. And they'll be like, no, wait, I didn't send that. Same for maybe a family member. People get compromised. And the whole point of attackers is they want to do movement. They want to move around and spread where they can do damage. So validate, validate, validate. Now, you can't use it as an excuse to ignore any emails from your boss. Boss sent you some work to do. Oh, I didn't do it because I was worried it was an attack. Probably going to limit your career. But you can call and validate, hey, did you really send this? Check those things. If the email, and this isn't an absolute, but if it's got like poor grammar, poor spelling, and that may seem like, well, that's stupid. Realize they might do that deliberately. They want to weed out the people who's going to cause them trouble. They want the lowest hanging fruit. Hey, this person, even with riddled with all these errors, they still click the link or they still call me. It's probably going to be an easier target for me. I like this. Again, urgency. That urgency is going to come up time and time and time again. They're always going to try and introduce urgency, either positive or negative. Your account's about to get frozen. You owe this money. Ooh, limited time. First 100 people get to try out the new Xbox. Free pizza to first 200 people. There's going to be a sense of urgency to, again, disconnect the brain from having time to really think about it. They want PII. They want information about you, be it a credential or something about you. They're trying to harvest something that they can then go and do bad with. You might have a generic greeting. Again, they're the lazier ones. But remember, even if it looks like it's got valid information, that stuff is out there, unfortunately. So again, any hint of anything, validate. Now, you may get these actually from your company. your company, as one way to try and educate you, you can simulate these things. You can do attack simulation training. And so you'll get an email and they want to see what you do. And then they can use it as a method, an exercise to help educate you from actual real bad attacks. For example, where I am, I can go junk phishing reports, so I can report these things. They want to get users used to those sorts of actions. And then obviously, we surf the web. Hey, we're on the web. Things we look for HTTPS. And make sure it's valid. If we're looking at a website, for example, if I just went over here, so this is just, I'm in my Azure website, but notice even on this, there's a padlock. I'm looking for this padlock. And if I click on it, it tells me, hey, the exact developer, the connection is secure. That's a good padlock. It's matching the name of the site. If you mistype in the URL, pay attention to that. Make sure it really is the domain. It's not Microsoft with a 0, for example, or it's something to trick you that looks valid. People will buy domain names that are very similar to a very commonly used domain name that you might just accidentally type it in wrong. Pay attention to that domain name. Pay attention that it is that HTTPS. Check that padlock. Be super careful of anything you download. There are technologies, for example, in Windows, there's Smart Screen that helps protect types of files that are not common or are known bad. It protects you from those things. In Edge, for example, also with sites, it will go and check those things. But again, be careful of what you visit. If you're on a website and a pop-up pops up, it's like, we found a virus. It's a trap. It's a pop-up. Terminate the process, walk away from that. If it was actually a virus, it would be Defender, for example, flagging up as a process. It wouldn't be something within the HTML page that's showing you that. So there'll be these pop-ups that try and make it look like it's a system activity. Hey, we found a virus, click here to remove virus. No, you click here, it's going to do something bad to your machine. Just terminate, don't interact with it. Terminate the process, go away. And I mean, don't use illegal software, pirated stuff. A lot of that has malware in it. So they make these things available for free because they want people to do it, because then they own their boxes and they can then proliferate and go and do bad things to other people. I mean, that's really the key things. There's other more detailed stuff, but if you do these key actions, that's really the important thing. So if I was I think maybe the most important thing, I mean, stay current. Make sure you're patching. Make sure you have auto update turned on. It's going to protect you from a huge number of things. I want unique identities and use MFA. Validate. Always be cautious. Any type of, unless I'm looking at the human being, don't trust it. Always validate everything. If there's the slightest hint, validate another way. I phone the bank up. I call the person. Whatever means, I don't use a method of contact that's talked about in that communication. I go direct to something else. Remember, evil Kermie is out there. He's a nice guy, really. And he's trying to do things. So keep those in mind. It's a fairly simple set of things. If you just always are suspicious, always take a second and rethink about the situation. Hopefully that will help you stay safe. So that was useful. Again, this applies to personal and work things. And stay safe out there.